All right, today we're jumping into a book that's, well, it's not something you just read. It's something you have to wrestle with. We're talking about Eugene Thacker's In the Dust of This Planet, a work that uses horror to basically take a hammer to our coziest ideas about reality. So let me ask you something right off the bat. Why do you seek out horror? I mean, really think about it. Why do we willingly sit down to watch a scary movie or pick up a terrifying book? What are we looking for? The easy answer is that it's a safe way to feel fear, right? A little thrill without any real danger. But Thacker comes along and proposes something way more intense. What if horror isn't an escape from reality? What if it's actually the most direct, unfiltered way of seeing it? And that's our jumping off point for this first section. We're going to push past this idea of horror as just, popcorn entertainment. Instead, we're going to treat it like a philosophical tool, one that reveals a much, much darker truth about who we are and where we are. So, this is the big idea, right here. Philosophical horror. And let's be clear, we are not talking about jump scares. This isn't about some monster hiding under your bed. No, this is a deep, intellectual dread. It's that sinking feeling you get when you truly grasp that the universe is completely, totally, and forever indifferent to us. No grand plan, no reason, no God watching over things. It just doesn't care. Okay, so how do we even begin to wrap our heads around that kind of cosmic indifference? Well, Thacker gives us this really brilliant three-part model of reality. And honestly, if you can get this distinction, you've pretty much got the key to his entire philosophy. All right, let's break this down. First up, you have the world. This is our comfort zone, right? Our little bubble of culture, society, language, everything we've built. Then you've got the earth. This is the natural world. Oceans, volcanoes, plagues. It can be wild and dangerous for sure, but we can kind of understand it through science or even religion. But then there's that last column, the planet. This is the real deal. It's the alien, the incomprehensible cosmos that operates on a logic that is not our logic. That is where the true horror lives. Okay, so if the planet is the source of this profound dread, how in the world do we even begin to perceive it? Well, that leads us to what Thacker calls a philosophy with teeth. He argues that horror is the perfect tool for the job because it's not a passive way of thinking. It's aggressive, it's confrontational. I mean, look at this. The whole point of horror, in this view, is that it shows us the absolute limits of our own minds. It's that moment where your brain just hits a brick wall. It's when all your logic, all your reason, just shatters against something that is truly, fundamentally senseless. And in that moment, you realize how futile it is to even try to make sense of it all. And this comparison here is just perfect for explaining it. Think about it. Both mysticism and horror are staring into the same great unknown. But look at the difference. The mystic tries to unite with it and feels awe. But the person experiencing horror, they're completely shattered by it. They feel nothing but dread. It's the same unknowable thing, but two totally opposite, gut-wrenching reactions. So where do we actually see this stuff in the wild? Well, Thacker points to horror movies. He says certain films, like you've probably seen some of these, The Thing, Event Horizon, they're not just movies. They're like modern-day rituals. They give us a safe way to peek over the edge into that abyss, into the planet, without completely losing our minds. I mean, a film like The Thing isn't scary because of the monster. It's scary because it shows reality itself completely breaking down in a way our brains just can't handle. All right, so once you start to accept this framework, you're forced to confront some really terrifying implications. And that brings us to what Thacker calls the unthinkable thought. And one of the most immediate places we find this is in our own bodies. Body horror. Thacker says we don't need to look for external monsters. Our own bodies are a constant source of this dread. I mean, think about it. Your body is this fragile sack of goo, this meat prison. It gets sick, it decays, it dies. It's a constant physical reminder that you're just a thing in a universe that couldn't care less about you. Now that is what he calls ontological terror. He even takes this idea into theology. He uses this concept called negative theology, which is basically when you define God only by what God is not. So God is not human. God is not understandable. God is not something you can even conceive of. And what happens when you do that? You strip away all the comforting parts, and you're left with this dark, empty abstraction, an absence that's way more unsettling than any monster could ever be. So here's the real kicker. If horror is what lets us glimpse the true indifference of the planet, then what does that say about, well, everything we do? All of our biggest projects, capitalism, religion, science, you name it, they're all just fancy scaffolding we've built over a giant, gaping abyss. They're just there to keep us busy, to keep us from looking down. So, if all of our systems are just distractions, what are we supposed to do? What's left? Well, that leads us to the final part of this, embracing the void. It sounds grim, I know, but Thacker suggests that maybe the only thing left to do is a kind of radical, unflinching acceptance. And here it is, almost like a dark, twisted how-to guide for seeing the void. First, you have to start seeing horror as a form of philosophy. Second, you have to accept that the planet just does not care about you. Third, and this one stings, you have to realize that our whole idea of understanding the universe is basically a joke. And then the final step, you have to stare right into that abyss that's inside yourself. And that really is the final, brutal takeaway. The real terror, according to Thacker, isn't death. No, the real terror is that ice-cold moment of clarity when you realize that everything you thought had meaning was just something you made up. Nothing you do matters, and it never, ever did. But it doesn't just end there in pure despair. He leaves us with a challenge, a question, and it's the same question I want to leave with you. If it's all true, if all meaning is just a story we tell ourselves, what are you going to build in that void?